Hi, my name is John Dumke, and welcome to one of my first video blogs here about a recent real estate transaction that we had that was very challenging. And every transaction does require work. There is no free lunch here. Sometimes the home has challenges, sometimes personalities can be challenging, and it's always something. Either way, it seems like I have to earn my keep somewhere along the line. However, in this one recent transaction, I earned my keep several times over. It was very stressful and exhausting. This recent transaction was the perfect storm because it was a confluence of problems. One problem exacerbated the other problem, and it was synergistic in a really bad way. Any one of the following 6 problems on its own would have been no issue. But combined, it turned this real estate sale into potentially the hardest transaction I've had save recently. The issues were: 1, the seller thought they had a termite dry rot free home, which was not the case. 2, the buyer's inspector didn't catch the dry rot bathroom. 3, the agent on the other end, the buyer's agent, this was only their 3rd deal in their life. 4, the buyer had signed off on all their contingencies. 5, the buyer's son had severe health issues regarding mold. And 6, the seller had a massive tax liability due in 30 days that they did not let me know about. 3 weeks into the escrow, everything seemed fine. The buyer had done their inspection, signed off on the physical inspection contingency. The appraisal was done. Everything appeared textbook fine. Then out of the blue, the buyer called me up to let me know they were canceling escrow. And I wasn't representing the buyer. So why would they be calling me since I was only representing the seller? I had had no conversation or contact with the buyer, and my reaction was, what? I was speechless, and I really didn't know where to start with what was my first conversation with the buyer. Usually I would get a tip-off from the other agent if there was a problem. But when you go from everything is fine to we want to sue our buyer's agent, and if we buy this home, our son's going to die, so we are canceling escrow, you really don't know where to start that conversation. The conversation with me and the buyer did start anyway, and it had to. I was immediately thrust into the middle of a dialogue where I was not aware of what had previously been said. So the start of the problem was the termite report, which didn't jive with what the home inspector had found. It is the job of the seller to get the buyer's disclosures within a certain period of time, and usually this is about 7 days. Due to the seller stating that they had a termite service that maintained the property, they wouldn't need us to schedule our termite company. And 3 weeks into the transaction, the seller's termite company finally came out to do their inspection. One of the bathrooms was so rotted out in the subfloor shower pan area that this termite company wouldn't even quote the repairs. It was beyond the scope of any repairs that they had done. When the buyer did see the report, they pretty much went through the roof. And understandably so, because the buyer's son had been in the emergency room for mold-related lung issues many times. To them, proceeding with the purchase would have been reckless. And normally this process would, be simply correct the dry rot condition, but the buyer's medical history caused this issue to be elevated to a higher level of concerns. Buyer's agent did nothing wrong. They clearly didn't have the experience to talk the buyer off the ledge or propose solutions. This compounded the problem. The buyer's agent was a personal friend that they thought they'd throw some business her way. They were not aware that this was only her 3rd transaction. Every agent has to start somewhere, but this was not a transaction to be cutting your teeth on. When I first spoke to the buyer, they were figuring out how to cancel escrow and or sue their buyer's agent. And this is where I stepped in. All of a sudden, needing to salvage the transaction, I communicated to the seller that there was a problem with their bathroom, confirmed by 2 termite companies. The seller let me know that would hit the fan if this transaction didn't close, but gave me no specifics. Why was the seller under so much stress and in such a panic? It seemed a little out of character, and not until 2 weeks into resolving this issue did the seller let me know that they had borrowed from their 401k to purchase their new home, and that this money had to be back in place within 30 days. And I wish I had known this up front, but at least now I had a timeline to get the job done and knew the importance of getting this deal closed. The IRS tax code does allow you to disperse money from a SEP IRA or a 401k and not pay taxes on it as long as you get the money back into a qualifying account within 60 days. And this is where the seller's $500K down payment came from for the purchase of their next home. And it needed to be redeposited within another 30 days at this point. So my first job with the buyer was to ascertain whether the buyers were really dead set against the home and they were just using this bathroom issue as a smokescreen, or whether the problem was simply the bathroom. This wasn't the easiest of tasks, as the buyer was an engineer and a little hard to read. Engineers, don't take this personally. I have an engineering degree, and engineers as a lot tend to be more analytical and less emotional. So it may be more difficult to read their motivations, as engineers were more about data points. The buyers approached every problem, though, from a what-if, worst-case mentality. Over and over I had to deal with these types of questions. Well, what if there's mold here and it goes everywhere? And, what if the inspector, they missed this bathroom here? How do I know that he didn't miss everything else and there's more bathrooms that aren't rotted out? So I felt like I was trying to dig the transaction out of a hole created by the other agent. The buyer had already lost faith in their buyer's agent and their inspector. The buyers wanted nothing to do with their agent and ceased all communication with their agent. And I became their point person, yet I was the seller's agent. So it put me in a little bit of a precarious position, one where I would more likely be distrusted. Whether the buyer were to proceed or not, I had to very quickly ascertain the extent of the dry rot in the bathroom. This required demoing the bathroom area to the point where one could see the extent of the dry rot. At this point, the what-ifs regarding the mold issue were eliminated. This was where the transaction started to turn around. Once the buyer felt like they were being given full disclosure from an honest and competent service provider, they calmed down and trust was slowly rebuilt. The buyer felt comfortable with my inspector, Marty Salcido, and hired him to review the balance of the home to make sure there wasn't a second bathroom that was rotting. While we had ascertained that there wasn't a mold issue and the extent of the dry rot was determined, we still had a big hole in the middle of a bathroom that needed to be resolved. This was the second big issue, how the bathroom was to be rebuilt. The extent of the bathroom damage was significant enough that the entire bathroom had to be redone. Fortunately, the seller had selected Eric Hetland of Hetland Construction to rebuild the bathroom. It was a stroke of luck that Eric had remodeled a bathroom for one of the buyer's personal friends, and those friends were very happy with Eric. So the buyer knew that the bathroom reconstruction would be quality. After about 2 weeks of negotiation hell, I felt like the universe threw me a bone. Now we had to just come to terms of how the bathroom would be rebuilt and get it done in time to close. Without going into more details, let me outline how the issue was basically resolved. It was resolved with full disclosure, competent service providers, good communication, a cooperative seller, and 30 years of knowledge and experience on my end to rebuild trust and resolve the issues in a very timely manner. Once trust has been lost, very rarely can it be rebuilt. The confluence of events left the buyers feeling like they had no choice but to cancel the transaction, even if their deposit was at risk. A cancellation would have been detrimental to the sellers. The transaction needed me to walk the buyers through the entire process, eliminate any concerns about mold, then rebuild the buyers' faith that they would eventually own the home of their dreams. After negotiations about how the bathroom would be completed and laying out the schedule, we got escrow closed with about 3 days to spare. That same week that we closed, I got a text from the buying family. It was a picture of all their kids jumping into the pool of their new home and how happy they were with their new dream house. I feel truly grateful for the sellers and the buyers putting their faith in me and the process. It was particularly fortuitous that my home inspector had lots of experience in mold-related issues, and I had a contractor that was well respected by all parties. With over 30 years in the business, I had the right expertise and experience to turn around a very disappointed buyer, eliminate a huge tax burden for the seller, and end up with two satisfied parties on both ends. Moral of the story is, do not borrow funds that need to be paid back within 60 days. Don't believe a termite company that only sprays around your home 4 times a year. Don't hire an agent that only has 3 transactions under their belt. And hire an agent with a vast level of experience and excellent communication and technical skills. Thank you very much for being part of our first video broadcast of this transaction. And we welcome any calls you may have. You can reach me at 562-572-2296. And hopefully I'll get a chance to work with you on your next real estate transaction. Bye-bye.